Having low self-esteem impacts how you see the world, but it also impacts how you interact with the world, and therefore how the world interacts with you. I know this isn't really new news, but it is kind of important. So let's talk about it. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe so I can provide perspective that empowers and encourages people. Let's work together to enrich the lives of the people around us. I'm Tatiana, poet, podcaster, writer, and social awareness advocate. And these are my words of wisdom. When you don't love yourself, that shows in how you interact with the people around you. Maybe you're someone who gets really defensive and you assume that any criticism that comes your way is an attack. Or you're someone who accepts all criticism and believes that it can't possibly be the other person, it's definitely you. Those sorts of mechanisms, defense mechanisms though they may be, bleed into other relationships that we have, and then they impact the way we see the world. So maybe you're someone who does get very defensive and is convinced that people are attacking you. Well, then you're going to be standoffish, because if you're defensive, you are in the defensive position. And if you're in the defensive position, then people can't see you because you're always defending yourself. Or if you're someone who is prone to accept everything and believe that it's their fault, well then you're extremely open. And if people have the opportunity to dump their garbage at your doorstep and blame you for it, some people absolutely will do that. So it interacts not just how we see the world, but how the world sees us. For example, the latter. If you're someone who's extremely open, people start dumping their garbage on you and you believe it's you. After a while, you'll get frustrated or annoyed and you'll say things like, "Why is this happening to me? I don't understand." And the truth is, it's happening to you because you're extremely open. There is a space between extremely guarded and extremely open, and that is the place we need to be in. So having low self-esteem manifests in many different ways. It's not even just those two, but it does impact how the world sees us. Therefore, it impacts how we get to move within the world. There's no place where this is more evident than in love. When we think of love, especially when there's someone who's suffering from depression, or if you're just someone who's having a hard time, if you don't love you, sometimes we feel like we need to find someone who will love us. And not just love us enough to fix us. But that's not a thing. You have to love you. Someone else can't love you whole. Someone else can't love you fixed. That's not how it works. What happens if you're someone who feels empty or broken, if you're someone with really low self-esteem? Not that people with low self-esteem are empty or broken. Those are just terms that I used to use and I know people with low self-esteem use. If you're someone who feels that way, when you enter into a relationship, those relationships will often be short-lived because you'll start to project your insecurities onto those people. You'll start to see them as diminished in value. Basically, it sounds terrible, but basically, because they love you, that somehow diminishes their value, which is insane brain logic, but it is brain logic nonetheless, and it's terrible. So, working on your own self-esteem, because it is self-esteem, working on your own self-esteem and self-confidence will make you a better partner, because you are then not looking for someone to complete you, you're looking for someone to complement you, because you by yourself are a whole person. You are, I swear, you're a whole person. You don't need someone to come in and fix that hole that's missing. You can do that yourself. It'll take some time and some patience and some therapy, but you can definitely do it on your own. But no, you will never find someone who will love you whole. I'm sorry. When I was younger, I was in this relationship with a guy who was going through a lot at the time. And to be honest, I was too. I was going through a great deal, but I was this guy's emotional support raft, and I dumped him. Yes, I know that sounds terrible, but it was the best choice for me because yes, he needed me, but I needed me. And I could not be the emotional support for both of us. Now, in a marriage or in a long-term relationship, there's gonna be times where the other person needs you and you have to put yourself aside for them and vice versa. That's completely normal. This relationship was not a marriage. We've been dating for like 2 months. Not the same thing. Point is, knowing your boundaries, knowing your limits, and realizing that you can support you. first. If I'm drowning, I cannot save somebody else. I have to save me first. If I can save me, then any extra energy I have can go towards someone else. But I can't save someone if they're going to push me under too. So remember that you are a whole person. You're not a broken vessel that we need to glue back together. You're a whole person. And having low self-esteem, that doesn't change the fact that you're still a whole person. And you can still do this, I promise. Now, I am not saying to go out and dump your significant other. I don't want anybody to come back and be like, well, Tatiana said that I should dump you. Not what I'm saying. What I am saying is expecting someone else to be your emotional support raft is akin to both of you drowning. So it's not gonna work. You have to be able to support yourself, at least the majority of the time. Again, we all have rough patches, but your relationship should not be built on you the caregiver, them the caregivee. I'm pretty sure that's not the correct term for that, but the point is, your relationship should not be that way. That's an imbalance. And if it shifts, then what? How is it gonna work? Because sometimes the caregiver needs help. Will the caregivee be able to provide it? So my point is, making sure your relationships are balanced and they fit you, and having low self-esteem means you tend to target people for your relationships that don't actually suit your needs. They're just people that you think will fill the hole. The perfect person for you, the whole you that you just don't see, could be right in front of you and you wouldn't notice because you're trying to find someone to meet what you believe the needs of your gap are. So low self-esteem is you not believing in yourself, and it comes from a lot of different places. I'm not gonna say it just comes from one source, but if you find yourself with low self-esteem, believe you me, I have been there. I completely understand. But the first place to start with low self-esteem is learning to love yourself. Learning how to see yourself the way your friends and your family sees you. See yourself as that whole beautiful creature that you are, and accepting that whole beautiful creature you are, because you are both whole and beautiful. Now, there are no quick fixes to fixing your self-esteem. Like there are no shortcuts to improving low self-esteem in 30 days. It's not a thing. It requires retraining your brain and reframing a lot of things. And it is a constant work in progress. You will constantly have to revisit it. It's you having to deal with the self-talk, that voice in your head that says negative things. Changing that voice so that you have a more peaceful conversation with it. If you sat down and let that voice actually speak, and then ask yourself, if you would say those things to your friends, you'd realize you wouldn't say those things to your friends. You realize that voice doesn't sound like your friends, it doesn't sound like your family, it's just extremely mean. Realizing that that voice is there because it thinks it's helping, and telling it to back off because you don't need it. Your low self-esteem does not have to be based off of anybody else. It's about you, who you are, and what you need to be happy. But like I said, there are no quick fixes, and it does require a great deal of reframing how you see the world and then how you fit into it. Accepting that maybe you're not going to be Bill Gates. I know I've been harping on Bill Gates, but accepting that you're not going to be Bill Gates or Oprah Winfrey, accepting the reality of your current situation, at least at this time. Not never, not going to say never, just saying today. Accepting who you are today and not judging who you are today by the expectations of 20 years ago, or judging who you are today by where you think you should be at this point of view. Accepting you right here, right now. Accept that person. Ask yourself, if nothing changed, would you love you? If the answer is no, then you need to work on that. Because if nothing changes, you should still love you. Because if you don't love you this way, you can't ask somebody else to come in, love you whole. You are whole. You are a whole person. You can love you. So, last anecdote before I leave you. Back in the day, and I mean this, I read the Narnia books, and the very last book, so spoilers, in the very last book, when Aslan raptures everybody to Narnia, in that space were these dwarves. I think they were dwarves. Again, I haven't read this book in ages, but I remember this particular scene so well. So basically there were these dwarves and they were sitting in like this cave in the book at one point, and Aslan's walking with the kid next to him, and they're having a conversation, and the kid sees the dwarf's like, oh, hey, they're here too. Like, they must be super happy. And Aslan's like, no, some people refuse to see even when you give them things. And he shakes his mane, like the dwarfs were complaining about being hungry. And so Aslan shakes his mane, and a beautiful feast appears before the dwarves. And the dwarves see the feast, and what they say is, oh, look at this food. It's covered in rotten. It's rotten, and it's got worms in it, and it's all disgusting. And everybody's shocked because from where they're sitting, it's this beautiful feast full of delicious foods, but from where the dwarves were sitting, it was just maggot infested gruel, right? But the idea that stuck with me, that I grasped from that scene, was how we see the world isn't necessarily how the world is, number one. But two, the reality is that if you have a negative frame of mind, then no matter what's given to you, you will paint the world that way. So if you have very low self-esteem, everything around you will feel like it's validating that perspective. So if you don't believe in you, then all the things you see in the world will appear to you as if they're validating that to you. So if you don't believe that you're successful enough, everybody else will appear to be extremely successful compared to you. If you don't believe you have the happier marriage, all other marriages will appear to be happier compared to yours, because you're not learning to accept what you have and as the best thing for you. Instead, you're looking at it through the lens of this negative, I don't want to say ungrateful, but ungrateful perspective. And low self-esteem impacts that. So when you have low self-esteem, you tend to see the world as either picking on you or as you're accepting a lot from it. So if you're someone who's on either end of that, I'm really sorry. And working on learning to love yourself more, that will no doubt help with your low self-esteem. And that video is right here.